the man who fought across 4 decades and climbed from flyweight to welterweight, and the only boxer in history to win world titles in 8 different weight divisions. A feat so rare, it may never be matched again, at least in our lifetime.
He also has a case for greatest fighter, pound for pound, who ever lived.
And he didn't just collect belts, he forged rivalries and even went to war against legends. But he wasn't just a champion, he was the people's champ, the pride of a nation and the name they cheered as their own. But like most legends, he didn't start at the top. In fact, the odds were so stacked against him, he probably shouldn't have made it at all. Because long before the lights, the belts, or the name the world would come to know, he was just a boy trying to survive the day. And yet somehow, he rewrote boxing history. You probably already know fragments of his story, the headlines, the highlights, the peak of his legendary career. But let me tell you a different kind of story. A story not just of triumphs, but one that looks beyond the belts and the glory. His underdog story.
The former flyweight world, super bantamweight world champion, former featherweight world champion, former super featherweight world champion, former light welterweight world champion, and reigning, defending WBO welterweight champion of the world, the fighting pride of the Philippines, Manny Pacman Pacquiao.
Pacquiao's fight didn't start in the ring. On December 17, 1978, in the remote village of Bukidnon, Emmanuel Dapadran Pacquiao was born into poverty. His family was so poor, their house looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. Manny was the 4th of 6 children, growing up in a home where scarcity was just part of life. His father, Rosalio, worked as a copra harvester, climbing coconut trees to scrape out a living. His mother, Jonicia, tried to fill the gaps, selling peanuts and rice cakes at the local market. But even together, they were barely scraping by. So, in hopes of better opportunities, the Pacquiaos moved to General Santos in Manny's early childhood. But poverty followed, and so did the unrest brewing across the region. He was only 6 years old at the time, but according to an ESPN article, he still vividly remembers the sound of gunfire echoing around them. It was the kind of sound that doesn't just echo in your ears, it settles in your memory and stays there. But while gunfire faded, the growling in their stomachs never really stopped. On better days, they had bananas, root crops, or whatever his mother could scrape together. Even then, every bite had to be split carefully because most of the time, it wasn't enough. And when there was nothing else, warm water had to stand in for food. But adversity wasn't finished with him just yet. Not even close. When Manny was around 12, his father had an affair and walked out on the family. And just like that, his mother was left to raise 6 children on her own. The household, already stretched thin, fell deeper into desperation. Manny had to leave school behind and spent his days selling donuts, collecting scrap, doing anything he could to bring home a few pesos. He didn't even own a pair of shoes for most of his childhood, but like everything else at that point, he just adapted. His feet toughened against the rough ground, forming calluses like armor. He didn't know it then, but those same feet would become one of his deadliest weapons in the ring. He was learning endurance through hunger and discipline through hardship. All he needed now was a spark. That spark came one night when his uncle Sardo Mejia sat him down to watch a fight. Mike Tyson versus James Buster Douglas. It would go down as one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. And for most kids, it would have just been entertainment. But for Manny, it lit something deeper. Surprisingly, Manny had once thought about becoming a priest. But after that night, he couldn't stop thinking about boxing. He started watching every fight he could, not just for fun, but like a student, hungry to learn, and waiting for the day he'd get his own shot. Soon after, his uncle began training him in his spare time. He even cleared a space inside the house and built a simple makeshift gym. There was nothing fancy about it, just a punching bag and a pair of boxing gloves. And even though his uncle had no formal training himself, they both took it seriously. They trained under one simple belief: the most devoted would be the most rewarded. And they were dead right. But that part comes later. Way later. After 6 months of training, Manny was ready for more than just drills. He started fighting local matches at Oval Plaza Park in General Santos, testing himself against anyone willing to step into the ring. And he kept winning. Soon he was traveling to other cities to face higher-ranked opponents. Each fight another test, each win another step forward. But it was also around this time that he dropped out of school. With nothing left to fall back on, he poured everything he had into boxing. By the time he was 15, there was nobody left in the South who could challenge him. Then, a promoter told him he was good enough to fight anywhere in the Philippines and invited him to Manila. But there was no contract, and he couldn't offer money for his trip. As it turns out, he was just another young fighter in a long line of prospects. Still, that was all Manny needed to hear. And while his heart ached for the city he grew up in, for the mother he hadn't told, and the friends he might never see again, he had a dream. And he knew what he needed to do. The plan was simple: stow away on a ship to Manila, 500 miles north. Manny arrived in Manila filled with hope and determination. For a provincial boy used to jungle trees and dirt roads, the capital felt like another world entirely. He was amazed by the sheer volume of people rushing in every direction. The cars, the intersections, the sheer enormity of it all. But that didn't change the fact that he had no money, no place to stay, and no plan beyond a quiet conviction that there was something here for him. Something better. Because beneath the dazzling lights and busy streets, the city was also chaotic, unfamiliar, and indifferent to his struggle. At one point, he even considered begging for food, but the lessons his mother taught him always resonated with him. That is, to not take the easy way out. So instead of begging, he placed his bet on effort and stubbornly found ways to keep going. He slept wherever he could, at the park, on a bench, or whatever spot he could find. And during the day, he walked the streets looking for work. Eventually, he landed his first gig, scraping rust off old metal at a local warehouse. It paid 160 pesos, a little over $6 at the time, and while it wasn't much, it was a start. Enough to eat and enough to last another day. From there, he hustled wherever he could, hauling bricks, washing dishes, tending gardens, even learning to sew for a tailor just to stay afloat. Long before grind became a hashtag, Manny was living it for real. But he wasn't in it for clout or quick wins. He was just trying to survive. Because he came to Manila chasing a dream, and he never lost sight of that. And while that dream was still a bit of a long way at this point in Manny's life, he did find the bridge to that dream the day he met a man named Ben Delgado. Ben ran a modest gym in Manila, and while his uncle had coached him back in General Santos, Delgado was a formal trainer with real structure and real experience. The kind of guy who could take him to the next level. And Manny knew that, so he hounded Delgado, asking for a chance to train. But Delgado's first impression wasn't very promising. He gave Manny a once-over, shook his head and said, "You're too small to be a real boxer." Still, there was something about the kid he couldn't quite dismiss. So he gave him a chance, and took him under his wing. He even allowed Manny to sleep in a tiny room next to the workout area. The room was pretty cramped, the kind that'll make you claustrophobic. But still, for Manny, it was enough. It kept him off the streets and, more importantly, within reach of the life he was chasing. He had no idea where this would lead, only that he had to follow it with everything he had. So he trained hard. Super hard. He'd run 6 or 7 miles, grind through drills, hit the bags, then do it all again. All this, while still holding down jobs to make ends meet, and even sending money back to his mom. He kept at it day in and day out, every single day, like a scene out of Rocky. Until finally, he made a decision. It was time to go pro. At 16 years old, Manny was still underage to fight in a professional match. But if you're wondering why he insisted on becoming pro way too early, let's rewind a bit. Manny had been fighting in amateur bouts since the age of 12. According to multiple sources, he racked up an amateur record of 60 wins and just 4 losses. Pretty impressive for a kid with no formal coach and barely any resources. And by the time he was 16, he was aiming higher, and he wanted to join the Philippine Olympic team. Unfortunately, he didn't make the cut. But that wasn't even the worst part. He found out that one of the team members was someone he had already beaten in the ring. Was it because he was too poor and had no connections? Too far from the capital? Or simply too unmarketable? Whatever the reason, he chalked it up to bad luck. But the politics of it all still left him disappointed. And it felt like his amateur career was going nowhere. So he made a choice. If the system wouldn't open up for him, he'd find another way in. And mind you, this all happened while he was still in General Santos, before he even set foot in Manila. I mean, think about it for a second. He went to Manila with almost nothing. Just the audacity to believe he could turn pro once he got there. Fast forward to where we left off. Manny was 16, still too young to go pro, and too light to qualify for the minimum weight class. So he lied about his age. And on the day of the weigh-in, he stuffed objects in his pockets just to make weight. It might sound absurd and maybe even borderline insane. But to him, it was simple. If he could just get the chance to step into the ring, he'd win. And he did. He was able to land his first professional fight through a grassroots boxing program called Blow by Blow, a weekly TV show that showcased local talent in modest venues. It didn't pay much, just a couple of dollars per fight, but it was enough to get his foot in the door. His slugger style turned heads, and his debut left a strong impression. But boxing isn't just about winning, it's also about risk. And not long after that first fight, reality hit close to home. A fellow fighter and close friend, Eugene Baratag, collapsed in the ring and later passed away. And this happened barely an hour before Manny was scheduled to step into the ring himself. It was a devastating moment that shook him to the core.
I don't know if I can come back to my family or not. I don't know.
And no one would have faulted him if he had walked away. And yet, he didn't. If anything, it reminded him why he had to give it everything. Because that night, his dream was no longer his alone. It's theirs now. His and Eugene's. Manny's debut fight was a good, solid performance. And from there, he didn't slow down. He racked up win after win, fight after fight. He even picked up a few knockouts along the way, earning buzz as an exciting young slugger with no fear in his step. And before long, he was 11-0, undefeated and still rising. Pretty wild considering he was underweight, not to mention underage when he first stepped into the pro scene. But then, this happened. In his 12th fight, Manny was matched up against Rustico Torrecampo and lost by knockout. He didn't see it coming, but something was already off going into that fight. He tried cutting weight like he always did, but still came in 1 pound over the limit. So he was penalized and had to wear heavier gloves. His body was growing faster than he realized. The KO loss was a rude awakening, yes. But it didn't take long for him to understand why it had to happen. He wasn't meant to win that night. He was meant to learn something. Something far more important than walking away with a win. And as it turned out, this loss was the spark that pushed him to start climbing and fighting in higher weight classes if needed. And maybe even climbing a little higher than he should have. But that's a story for a little later. Instead of falling apart after the loss, Pacquiao rededicated himself to training. And then he went on an impressive 15-fight unbeaten streak. And mind you, in these 15 fights, 14 of them ended in knockouts. He came back, and he came back harder than ever before. And trust me, people were about to notice. During that run, Pacquiao claimed the OPBF flyweight title, knocking out Chokchai Chokvivat in the 5th round. He kept winning and knocking people out, and eventually, the right people started paying attention. Suddenly, a world title shot doesn't feel like a pipe dream anymore. And on December 4th, 1998, it happened. The 19-year-old Pacquiao traveled to Thailand to face WBC flyweight champion Chachai Sasakul. Sasakul wasn't just experienced. He was a technical discipline champion with a 32-1 record, fighting in his home country as the clear favorite. On paper, it looked like a mismatch, but once the fight started, it was closer than anyone expected. Nevertheless, Sasakul was actually winning in the scorecards. But then the 8th round came, and it left everyone stunned. This stunning victory over a seasoned, heavily favored opponent made Pacquiao the lineal flyweight champion, marking his rise from a local name to a true world-class fighter. And at just 19, he became the youngest Filipino to ever do it. It could have ended there, and honestly, it would have been a great story. Luckily for us, this wasn't even the peak. Not yet. It was just the first glimpse of how high he might go. But while his career was rising, something else was about to hit him too. And this time, he probably wouldn't mind taking the hit. In 1998, the young Manny returned to his hometown of General Santos City for a brief rest after a fight. That's when Ronaldo Zamora, friend and occasional training assistant, approached him with a question he didn't know would change his life forever. "Would you like to meet my niece?" And Manny, who always enjoyed meeting new people, casually agreed and headed to the local shopping mall, where Ronaldo's 19-year-old niece was working. But when they walked into the shop, Manny took one look and froze. Her name is Maria Geraldine Zamora, but everyone calls her Jinky. Manny, who's fearless and always moving inside the ring, just stood there, awkward and silent. If this were a boxing match, it would have been an instant knockout in the first round. Thankfully, Ronaldo did the talking, and while Manny didn't land a punch, he scored a dinner. And just like that, he had a reason to see her again. And the dinner went pretty well. They talked comfortably, shared ideas, and for Manny, that night was unforgettable. From then on, he kept finding reasons to see her again, and he got creative. He'd show up with breakfast, drop off dinner, and even try to win over her sisters. I can't speak for Jinky, but I think she was charmed by his quiet persistence. What stood out even more, though, was the way he talked about helping people, about wanting to give back. She was involved in church work and local charity herself, so those qualities in Manny resonated with her more than anything. And so the bond kept growing between the two, quietly but steadily. And on May 10th, 1999, Manny and Jinky got married. At this point, everything seemed to be going right for Manny. He was a world champion, and he had just married the woman he loved, and she loved him back. Nothing could go wrong, and he'd live happily ever after. Except, real life doesn't work like that. Because just a few months after getting married, he failed to make weight at the weigh-in, forfeiting his WBC title before he could even face Medgun Singh Surat. And to top it all off, this happened. In the third round, Pacquiao went down from a body shot, and the ref stopped the fight. Anyone would be devastated by a loss like that. He had finally become a world champion, and then lost it in less than a year. But more than anything, this is the kind of moment that makes you second-guess yourself. The kind that makes you wonder, was that your peak? But unlike his past struggles, this time he didn't have to face it alone like he did when he first arrived in Manila. This time he had someone beside him, someone to help carry the weight. This time he had Jinky. He could turn it around and slowly rebuild from here. But then again, slow isn't exactly a word you'd use to describe Manny. Because right after the Singh Surat loss, he moved up in weight and seized the WBC International Super Bantamweight title with a knockout win. He defended that belt 5 more times, and every single fight ended in either a KO or a TKO. Through it all, he never stopped hoping for another shot at the world title. And then in 2001, the phone rang. It was half a world away from his home country, and on barely 2 weeks' notice. But it was a title shot. So of course, Pacquiao and his team didn't hesitate to take it. And just like that, the stage, the opponent, and the moment were set in motion. But none of them knew what was coming. Not even Pacquiao. In early 2001, Lelohanalo Ledwaba is pretty pumped, gearing up for another title defense. He's 33 and 1-1 with 22 knockouts, and looking every bit like a rising star. Some might even consider him the best 122-pound boxer in the world at the time. And at the rate he was going, names like Barrera or Morales wouldn't have been far off. I mean, he defended his title 5 times, knocked out 4 of those challengers, and held the belt for almost 3 years. And this next fight was shaping up to be another solid step forward. He was set to fight on the De La Hoya and Castillejo undercard, a big platform and a big night. But just 2 weeks before the fight, his opponent, Enrique Sanchez, got injured during sparring and had to pull out. Suddenly, Ledwaba's team had a problem. They needed a replacement, and they needed it fast. But for a fighter of Ledwaba's caliber, the risk was too high and the notice was too short. If only they could find a ranked fighter bold and crazy enough to take the fight. Thankfully, or maybe unfortunately, they did. A kid from Asia accepted, and he happened to be a southpaw too, just like Sanchez. So it wouldn't require much of a change in game plan. It shouldn't be that different, right? Meanwhile, in a small gym in California, Freddie Roach was about to have his world turned upside down. His old mentor Eddie had warned him years earlier not to open a boxing gym because it's more trouble than it's worth. But Freddie did it anyway, and a couple years later, Muhammad Ali walked into his gym, spending 4 hours entertaining everyone, making it the greatest day the gym had ever seen. It taught Freddie a lesson. You never know who might walk through your door. It could be the next Ali or the next champion that will make history in your gym. But when a small guy walked in that day, thin, unassuming, clearly from one of the lighter weight classes, he didn't look like any of those things. His name is Manny Pacquiao, and he looked ordinary. Just another small fighter hoping to make it. He asked if Freddie would work the mitts with him. So they put on the gloves, and all it took was 1 round.
After 1 round of mitts with Manny Pacquiao, I says, wow, this kid can fight.
Freddie had felt thousands of punches in his career, but this was different. Speed and power. At that weight class, fighters usually have one or the other, but this kid had lightning-fast hands with freight train power behind every punch. But what came next would shock him even more. Curious about this unknown fighter, Freddie asked where he'd been training before. And the answer stopped him cold.
And he says, Freddie, I started in New York and I came across the country and I stopped at every gym I could. And everyone else turned me down.
Freddie had found something everyone else had missed. Over the next several days, they trained together, and with each session, Freddie became more certain of what he was witnessing. And he just knew. This kid was about to surprise the world. On June 23, 2001, Manny stepped into the MGM Grand in Las Vegas to fight one of the biggest fights of his career at the time. This was his first time fighting on American soil, and he was such an unknown commodity that even the commentary team couldn't get his name right.
Pacquiao. Say Pacquiao. Pacquiao.
60-1, or less than 2%. According to Freddie, that's what the odds makers thought of Manny's chances against Ledwaba. Heck, some sportsbooks even refused to take bets on the fight. As far as they were concerned, 2 weeks wasn't enough preparation for an opponent like Ledwaba. It was that obvious, and everyone knew how this would end. But when the opening bell rang, something immediately felt different. From the first exchange, Pacquiao looked sharper, crisper, and faster than anyone expected. He even bloodied Ledwaba's nose and landed the harder shots by the end of round 1. And by round 2, Ledwaba hit the canvas and was already in survival mode. You could even hear the commentary team's tone starting to change.
Ledwaba came in as a potential star. Right now it looks like Pacquiao may go out as the star.
Round after round, what was supposed to be a routine title defense became a one-sided beatdown. And by round 6, it was over.
Pacquiao may take care of it for him. And almost a resignation in the eyes of Ledwaba.
Yeah, and Joe Cortez has seen enough.
2 knockdowns and the referee declared a TKO. It was actually pretty satisfying when the same commentator admitted this.
I had never seen him. I frankly had never heard of him. But I've seen and heard of him now.
And you want to see him again.
I want to see him again.
I do too.
That night, a 60-1 underdog rewrote the odds. And boxing insiders were suddenly paying attention to a new name. While the Ledwaba victory should have been the perfect launchpad, things can go sideways in boxing real fast. 4 months later, Manny found himself in San Francisco in one of the messiest fights in his career. An accidental headbutt in the early rounds opened a nasty cut above his eye, forcing him to fight with blood dripping down his face, fighting almost half blind. And on top of that, Agapito Sanchez kept hitting below the belt. George Foreman even thought Agapito should have been disqualified.
In your view, should Sanchez already have been disqualified from this fight?
For a long time. Too many low blows.
When the doctor finally stopped the fight in round 6, they were forced to the scorecards. And the result? A controversial split draw. Technically, Manny kept his IBF title, but you could just tell from his expression that he was a bit disappointed and maybe even frustrated. But here's what separates good fighters from great ones. Setbacks don't break them. Over the next year, Manny went on an absolute tear. Jorge Julio, demolished. Faprekorb, Rakiatgim, lights out. Serekjan, TKO finish. Emmanuel Lucero, one devastating left hand, and it was over. And then the call came. Marco Antonio Barrera was looking for his next opponent, and Manny Pacquiao's name had made it onto the list. Now, unlike Ledwaba, who was seen as a rising talent, Marco Antonio Barrera was a boxing royalty. This was the man who dismantled Prince Nassim Hamed and ended his undefeated streak. The same fighter who went toe-to-toe with the division's most dangerous names, guys like Eric Morales and Johnny Tapia. At this point in time, Barrera was widely considered the number 3 best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and had a far better resume than Pacquiao. I mean, this guy racked up 57 wins and 40 knockouts, with multiple world titles in 3 weight classes. And to be clear, Barrera was not some washed-up legend coming into this fight. He was well within his prime. Pacquiao, on the other hand, had just moved up 4 pounds to featherweight, skipped the usual tune-up fight, and went straight to one of the world's best instead. He had some impressive wins, sure, but he'd never faced elite competition like this. So when the Vegas oddsmakers made Pacquiao a 4-1 underdog coming into this fight, everyone probably agreed. On November 15th, 2003, Manny walks into one of his biggest fights in San Antonio, and the sea of Mexican flags is overwhelming. It's funny because the Manny of today has won the hearts of many people and is probably one of the most beloved and cheered boxer today. But at this point in time, the Coliseum is packed with 20,000 screaming fans, but about 95% of them are rooting against him. When Barrera's name was called, the crowd exploded.
Marco Antonio Barrera.
One of the best receptions he'd ever received. Compared to that, Pacquiao's reception was lukewarm at best.
the challenger, the IBF Super Bantamweight Champion of the World, Manny Pacman Pacquiao.
The message was clear. Barrera's people were in the house, and this was his new hometown. I can only assume, but Manny must have felt like he'd just walked straight into enemy territory. Just a few seconds into the fight, Manny slips on his own feet, but the referee signals a knockdown and started counting. And you can just see the confusion and frustration on his face. It's the worst possible start to the biggest fight of his life. But if you knew Manny, he wasn't about to take this lying down. He just stayed focused, fought his way back into the round, and didn't make a fuss about it. And while Barrera took the first round, it was obvious he had himself a real fight. But more importantly, Pacquiao was getting more aggressive as the fight went on, and he was winning exchanges with his hand speed. It's like Manny had too much speed for Barrera. Surely he wasn't getting overwhelmed, was he? But then, this happened.
Hard left hand, straight on the button by Pacquiao. Down goes Barrera. He's been knocked down 3 times in his career.
When Barrera got up, you could see it in his eyes. This kid wasn't messing around. He was looking to take his crown, and he might be in serious trouble. From that point on, Pacquiao unleashed a suffocating storm of punches. And round after round, the punishment continued. You can even feel Barrera's frustration.
It's the first time I've ever seen Barrera so visibly rattled.
The crowd that was once drowning the stadium in cheers grows quieter with each passing minute. By round 11, Barrera was still fighting with his heart, but he was running on fumes and pride alone as he hit the canvas again. And as the next assault began, Barrera's corner finally made the call.
3 more minutes of this.
No, because Pacquiao is not backing off. If you had a guy that was
He's getting hurt. Here comes Barrera's corner. Barrera's corner man is up on the apron. He's going to step into the ring.
It's over. The unknown Filipino has just destroyed Mexico's finest. That night, Manny Pacquiao became the first Filipino and first Asian to win world titles in 3 different weight divisions. But more than that, this was the moment the boxing world witnessed a fearless fighter in Manny, who against the odds walked into hostile territory, systematically broke down a respected boxing hero of his country, and walked out of that ring not just with a win, but with the beginning of something bigger than anyone expected. He also earned himself a new nickname, the Mexicutioner. And trust me, he was just getting started.